UFC 285 promises to deliver one of the finest fight cards of 2022. A truly stacked lineup of bouts that just so happens to feature one of the most significant title fights of the era.
It's time!
UFC 284 just managed to serve up a battle of very high stakes as the pound-for-pound number 1 and 2 collided over the course of 5 riveting rounds. But the return of Jon Jones promises to bring a different level of anticipation entirely. Because no matter how you feel about this divisive former 205-pound champion, if he is able to capture UFC gold as a heavyweight, it's likely going to make his claim at GOAT status completely undeniable. But before we dive into this insane heavyweight main event, another fighter who is within touching distance of her own greatest of all time argument will attempt to make her 8th consecutive defense of her flyweight belt. Valentina Shevchenko versus Alexa Grasso might seem like an afterthought in terms of legitimate danger levels, but if we learned anything last time around, is that Shevchenko is most certainly human. But as the longest-serving UFC champion in the history of women's MMA, one less than conclusive defense against Taila Santos isn't going to tarnish her legacy. In fact, it might be safe to assume that Shevchenko is going to be driven to make a real statement this time, to serve up a reminder to both the fans and her fellow contenders that she should not be underestimated. The Taila Santos fight was indeed a shock, as the Brazilian challenger found her rhythm early and pushed the champ to the very brink of defeat. But Shevchenko managed to do enough, retaining the belt while setting up a fight with yet another interesting but unheralded contender. Alexa Grasso has been very quietly working up a strong run of form, going 4-0 with wins over Ji Yeon Kim, Macy Barber, Joanne Wood, and Vivian Araujo to earn her title shot. On the surface, it doesn't appear as though she will have any specific advantages from a technical standpoint over Valentina, but it's pretty fair to say that most people counted out Taila Santos as well. What we know Grasso will bring is experience, having matured from a 23-year-old debutante into the prime fighter we see in front of us now. There's a good chance that Shevchenko brings an additional level of fire with her to the cage this time around. But in recent years, we've gotten very used to seeing dominant champions losing under extraordinary circumstances. A win for the Bullet could well make the UFC finally set up a trilogy fight with Amanda Nunes, but even if they don't, things are really starting to take off with the flyweight top 10. Contenders like Manon Fiorot, Aaron Blanchfield, and the aforementioned Taila Santos have certainly injected some much-needed life into the 125-pound weight class. And even if the longtime flyweight queen Shevchenko can earn her 8th consecutive defense, it's pretty fair to say that the road ahead will be a tough one, filled with the type of matchups that have been noticeably absent from the division in recent times. It's a very solid co-main event. But let's be real, the reason most of you are here is for that scintillating blockbuster showdown in the top spot. And with good reason. The best fights in MMA are often the ones that are anything but straightforward, the ones with major unknowns that spring up when trying to break it down. Even the sharpest technical analysts are left with more questions than answers going in, as it becomes clear that a bout's unprecedented nature is making it a nightmare to call. That billing certainly rings true for Jon Jones versus Cyril Gane. In the 3 years that have passed since Jones last made an appearance in the cage, the public's perception of him has certainly taken a few hits. Of course, as a constant magnet for controversy, Jones can always be relied upon to find himself in the headlines for the wrong reasons. But above all of that, his last appearance in the octagon left more than a few fans unconvinced. As the old saying goes, you're only as good as your last fight, and MMA fans are quite fickle when it comes to how they see these athletes. Jon Jones managed to beat the one-time hot prospect Dominic Reyes by the skin of his teeth. It was by no means a vintage Jones performance, and while you can certainly make an argument for him winning 3 of 5 rounds, it would by no means be a strong one. And that's how Jon left the sport, with many doubting his prowess. All of the years of insane technical mastery and big-name victories didn't count for quite as much as many may have believed, and rampant PED accusations didn't help either. But in front of Jon Jones lies the opportunity to get it all back, to make a statement win that would in many ways elevate his stock to a level beyond his peak years as the 205-pound champion. Heavyweight is by far the riskiest division in the sport, and with Francis Ngannou now gone, it's pretty clear that the best fighter in the weight class right now is Cyril Gane. If Jones wanted our attention, he's got it. But in front of him lies a test that may even be too much of an ask for him, even if he comes in at his very best. Cyril Gane is a fighter who just appears to be getting better every time we see him. Like he's slowly figuring out exactly how to take his already masterful striking and make that transition to MMA fully complete. Let's not forget just how inexperienced Gane is in mixed martial arts. 12 fights, 11 wins, and 1 sole defeat to Francis Ngannou. That's all Cyril has had to work with. Thrust into the UFC at 3-0, this man has been forced to learn on the job, showing clear improvements every time he makes that walk. In there with Ngannou, sure, his defensive frailties in the wrestling department were exposed, but let's not forget how inept he made the Predator look on the feet. He did that to a guy who has KO'd every high-level opponent he has beaten. But in spite of all of that power, he just couldn't make it work against Gane. Cyril is a different level of striker within this heavyweight mix. He's not the most naturally powerful fighter in the division, but punches with a real snap with perfect form, and his kicks are slowly rising to the top of his arsenal as a major threat. Indeed, he got dragged into a brawl to some extent in there with Tai Tuivasa last time around, but his use of body kicks in that fight was truly remarkable. While this fight is standing, don't make the mistake of thinking that Jones will enjoy the same advantages he did at 205. Gane has a reach that is comparable to Jon, taking away one of the major tools to his success. And though Jones's unorthodox nature can be relied upon to spring up problems for anyone, it's not a push to say that he has never faced an all-round striker as fundamentally sound as Cyril. Even guys like Lyoto Machida and Alexander Gustafsson, these fighters are not on Gane's level when it comes to an all-encompassing build to beat Jon Jones. But while this fight shouldn't be looked at as a simple case of striker versus wrestler, it's clear that the major route to victory here for Jon will be focused around his wrestling. Through his later years at 205 pounds showed his success levels in the takedown game drop. Bones remains one of the all-time greats in this area. And if he can find himself in the top position in any way that Ngannou did against Gane, that could and likely will spell trouble. So what are the major questions about this fight? Well, first of all, Jon has never fought as a heavyweight. He was always a pretty lean 205-pounder, and though he is clearly packing on the pounds in the correct way, slowly readying himself for his new division, it's hard to know how his newfound physicality will serve him. Will he be a touch slower, quicker to burn himself out, or will he struggle with an opponent who isn't dwarfed by his gargantuan arm reach? Maybe the striking could be a bridge too far, and Cyril Gane's ability to move his feet and strike from distance proves to be Jones's undoing. But what if Jones is actually better as a heavyweight? What if his technical prowess is only augmented by his added bulk? Maybe he will hit harder, be more deadly with his wide range of spinning shots and versatile kicks. Perhaps his takedown game will be truly unstoppable as a heavyweight, and even someone as talented as Cyril Gane will be too inexperienced a wrestler to stop him. There's also a real question to be asked about how good Jon will need to be to beat Cyril Gane. What if Bones Jones is better than ever, but is still not good enough? Because as much as it's fun to talk about Jon and his own pursuit of greatness, we could be looking at an era-defining talent in Cyril Gane as well. A win for Gane here would be career-defining. As things stand, as much as we look at Jones's narrow wins over Alexander Gustafsson, Dominic Reyes, and even Thiago Santos as proof of his vulnerability, these divisive wins are as close as we've ever come to seeing him lose. Make no mistake, while you may have scored some of these, or even all 3 of them against Jones, you cannot deny that there's an argument that he won them. Nobody has ever definitively bested Jon Jones in the cage, and what makes this fight with Cyril Gane so interesting is that the Frenchman has the ability to really make his levels felt in there. It's the hallmark of a great fighter when the only arguments you can make against their in-cage performances are controversial decisions that could have gone the other way. Think GSP versus Hendricks. But at heavyweight, a division that Jones has never fought in, after all that time away, there is the potential for things to go very badly for him in there with Gane. Cyril has fought 6 times since Jones last made the walk. There's a lot of cage experience to try and overcome, and if ring rust is a factor, we will likely find out very quickly. But the other side of this fight is the reason a lot of you are tuning in. If Jon Jones can in fact pull this off, we really need to start having another discussion entirely. As we said, Gane is the best heavyweight in the UFC right now, and even though he narrowly lost to Ngannou, there are many fans who would confidently pick him in a rematch, so long as he made the correct improvements. But for Jones, a win here represents a major redemption arc. In fact, it goes without saying that it would be the most impactful victory in a second division's title fight we've ever seen. It would go beyond GSP beating Bisping, or McGregor beating Alvarez, Nunes beating Cyborg, or any of them. These are the type of stakes we rarely see in the UFC, a fight that could well anoint a new, undeniable GOAT of the sport. Sure, you can bring in the PD stuff, but trust us, if you want to have that conversation, you will find it just gets messier and messier. For all intents and purposes, if Jones can find a win over Cyril Gane, he will double down on his status as the greatest MMA fighter of all time. And the fact that we're closing in on one hell of a fight card with this monumental matchup sitting in the headliner spot, yeah, it's a good time to be an MMA fan.